Welcome back to Game Brigade. My name is Brian, and today we're going to be diving into Stalker, the board game from Awaken Realms, currently on GameFound. Now, this video series is the Should You Back series, and basically it's a deep dive into the campaign so that you can make the best backing decisions going forward. I want to make sure that you are fully aware about what this game is, the mechanics of it, so you can make the greatest decision. So without further ado, let's dive right in to the campaign page. Okay, so first off, we're going to be taking a look at Stalker. This is a few days already in the campaign. I've already talked about this once on my crowdfunding roundup, but I decided we'll do a deeper dive look into the Stalker board game because I am very interested in it, and that's usually what drives my desire to do these Should You Back videos. Okay, so first off, we have 14 days left in the campaign from the moment this was recorded, and they have just broken $2 million, so congratulations to Awaken Realms. Now, I like to talk about the production company who's making this game, talk about what games they kind of have in the pipeline or how they've done in the past. Awaken Realms is so far one of the pinnacle companies, I would say, in terms of making very, very good products as well. Well, let's take that back a step. I would rather say they're very good at delivering the games at a consistent level. Let's say that. What's the best way to pronounce, say that? It's very curious. Awaken Realms has yet to really ask for money. They have yet to fail in terms of delivery. Now, when I want to say great games, you know, that's kind of up to debate sometimes, and we'll talk about that as we go through. So what is Stalker, the board game? Well, this is an IP-based game from a PC game that I think it's about roughly 15 years old. This is actually one of the first times that I haven't actually played the video game when it comes to one of these IP-based board games. I usually have very intimate knowledge about it, but this is one I actually didn't play, but I was aware of it, and I didn't play it because I didn't have a PC that was capable of running the graphics at the time that this was really popular, and now it's, you know, not quite as popular in modern gaming culture. But Stalker is a game set in Chernobyl or Pripyat in Ukraine, which was a site of a nuclear disaster back, I believe, in the 70s. I don't quote me on the exact timeline, but that's roughly the timeline we're looking at here. And so the theory of this game, or the design of the game, is that you are a stalker who will go into the quarantine zone, the no entry zone, to look for quests or treasures, and you're usually trying to better yourself by going deeper. But once you go into there are other stalkers, other marauders doing the same thing, and there are also creatures that have been morphed or altered by the radiation effects. Now that's the game that we're going to be playing in here. That's the world we're going to be diving in, and you are going to be playing as a stalker in this cooperative game set here by Awaken Realms. First off, gameplay wise, when I'm looking at this one and I'm looking at other games, I am seeing Stalker personally as a potential replacement for Nemesis. I'm seeing a very thematically based game that uses stealth maneuver and strategic tactics, but also I'm seeing something that looks a little bit more cleaned up than Nemesis. Now, a lot of people have given me a lot of grief about my recent opinions based on Nemesis. Nemesis was one of my all-time favorite games in terms of anticipation, and then at the time I really loved the thematic feel of it. But after playing Nemesis so many times, I kind of started wishing there was more there. I thought sometimes it was overly hard to be overly hard, and that the mechanics weren't as good as I wanted to be while being extremely thematic. I think Stalker is going to be extremely thematic. I think the gameplay mechanics are cleaner, and it's going to provide that strategic element that I think was limited or lacking from Nemesis.
Perfect. Everything, down to the last minute details.
So that's something to take a look at. If you're looking at one or the other, there's potentially a Nemesis 3 coming down very, very soon on the road, so you might want to look at that one as well. Maybe hold off on pledging this one till late pledge if that's something you might be interested in checking out. But to me, I'm looking at this game as that potential replacement. And so let's talk about why that is. So in this game, it's going to be there's going to be two versions. You're having a campaign narrative story that you're going to go through, and there's 3 different campaign chapters you can go through, roughly about 8 to 12 hours of gameplay in each chapter. So each mission will roughly be about 2 to 4 hours, depending on the length of those campaigns. That's great. I love the fact that there's a campaign narrative that we're going to be going through. There's a storyline that we're going to be progressing. That is really good for me on that regard. But we also are going to have a lost mission sort of thing where you can have a setup and play and just do a scenario, like a pick up and play, kind of easy. If you don't want to dive into a campaign, but maybe you want to show your friend this game, you've got a few hours, kind of like what I would look at like with Cthulhu Death May Die kind of situation. So you're going to have those two different gameplay elements. And so you've got the zone survival. That's what I was just talking about with you show your friend, but you're also going to have the core box here. So yeah, this is the one-off play sessions, roughly about 2 to 3 hours. The gameplay of this is you're going to be inserting into this world. You're going to be moving around these tiles, looking for different objectives, trying to keep out of the line of sight of enemies, find different ways to strategically maneuver and engage those enemies using either cover or being behind them for additional damage. So there's going to be a strategic element to your movement, and the terrain will matter based on your placement. So that's really cool. I think that's an upgrade above a lot of other games. And I also see this game as maybe a potential replacement for the feeling that I get for when I'm wanting to play Zombicide. Zombicide has a very similar look in terms of placing tiles, entering rooms, doing some searching and looting, but it's a lot more beers and pretzels. So this is an example of, well, if you like that kind of idea of a game, but it's not quite perfect, this might be what you're looking for as that replacement. Now, obviously, I haven't played this game. I don't know if this is going to be the better game, but that's something I've been kind of seeing is very similar kind of feeling, but this one's going to have a lot more strategic elements involved in it. So, what is the cost of the game? Well, there's a few pledge levels right now that we can talk about. I'm pretty sure we're looking at pretty much everything, unless there's going to be an expansion for additional content. This is what we have. The core pledge comes at $95. It's going to get you the 4 Stalkers, plus included any stretch goals. We'll talk about stretch goals a little later. You get the dual layer player boards for the players to sit on. You've got the standard cards, the enemy standees. We'll talk about standees shortly. The 20 plus map tiles you're going to play on, as well as scenario boxes. Now, there are 9 scenario boxes. Those are broken into 3 separate campaigns, 3 each. You're going to have the stretch goals. Now, in terms of the value assessment we kind of talked about on this channel, if you wait for retail, this will be retail. Almost always IP-based games generally are retail assessed, but you're not going to be getting the stretch goals. So that's going to be the increased value you're going to see from pledging this now, and that's going to be something you're going to have to assess versus paying shipping, because obviously if you buy retail, you're usually not going to have to pay that shipping costs. So you're going to have to kind of weigh that up for yourself. And we'll talk about those stretch goals as they release, and there's going to be more release because they're doing a monetary release as well as a daily unlock. So the stretch goals we'll talk about later. And then we have the zone survival. This will also be free with the GameFound edition, and it's going to be those additional modes for you to play for like that just quick and easy play for your friends or whatever. I think this is a great value so far for $95 when you're looking at the grand scope of everything included in this game. Now, when we look at the other pledge levels, let's go and find those real quick. Right here. You have the Stalker Adventure Pledge. The Adventure Pledge is going to be including the zone threats. Now, I want to talk about the zone threats because this is the one that's going to be one of the most pledged versions. So I think people should be aware of what they're buying versus, the FOMO aspect. Zone threats is purely a cosmetic entry. You're looking at 50 models that are to replace the standees that come in the base game. So you can see you get these Snorks, you get the Chimera, the Pseudo Giant, some exoskeleton characters, poltergeists. You're getting quite a bit of these models, and I will say that Awaken Realms has very much increased and impressed me with their miniature design. We recently got Lords of Ragnarok in. The models are incredible. So Awaken Realms has really nailed the miniatures, and I think that you can pretty much trust that any type of resin or prototype pictures here are going to be very close to what you're going to expect to get in game. So you got the rodent here, you got the controller, bandits, etc. So what I want to talk about though, when you're talking about a pledge like this, because this is about a $75 increase in terms of your cost, is that sometimes, now I haven't played this one, but in other games like Tainted Grail, ISS Vanguard, Ether Fields, they have had very similar miniature enemy expansions, and that they have usually been not as necessarily needed as you might think, because sometimes those enemies might show up once, or you might use a mini one time and never see it again. So something you could consider is that you are getting the standees, something similar to like when in Gloomhaven, which people seem to love in terms of the design. So you could save yourself some money and go with the standee version and avoid this, and reduce that potential risk that these minis aren't going to be as used as they would in other games. Now, I get the FOMO. I am there with you in terms of the design and the feeling aspect of having these on the table. It is very cool. But the other thing I want to warn you about is this game is going to have walls. You're going to have anomaly tokens. You're going to have your miniatures, and you're potentially going to have these enemies roaming around. In terms of other Awaken Realm games I've played, they have become sometimes incredibly cluttered on the board, and it makes it difficult to actually see the gameplay that's happening. So just be aware in terms of the amount of stuff you get, and we'll talk about that shortly, because there's another pledge that increases that even more. So here we have the zone threats we were talking about, but this is also going to include the anomaly as well as the obstacle, stuff. Again, increasing the thematic feel of the game, but also increasing the potential clutteredness feeling that's out there. Most of these things are already going to be stuff that's going to be in the game. You're just replacing the tokens that they are going to be represented by. So that's something to be aware of. The anomalies pack is going to be indicator that there's going to be something here, or some sort of anomalies in effect, not necessarily something bad. Anomalies can be good or bad based on the mission that you're currently on. It might be, finding some sort of item that will help you later on in the mission, so you could go to them, or they could be awful, something really bad that would be, leading to your death. So that's to be aware of. And then obviously we have these obstacle cardboards. These are just purely cosmetics for you to put on your board to add the theme and add the realism. But again, I'm not totally sure I'm in love with these just yet. Based on the games I've played with Awaken Realms that have somewhat similar with these terrain packs and miniature packs, it just kind of gets a little messy. So let's talk about the gameplay real quick before we finish up here. Stalker has a few things that I really like. First off, the thematic feel. I talked about this at the beginning of this video when I talked about how I think it could replace Nemesis for me because of the theme and the thematic feel. This game includes a feature that I think is really cool. It's going to have a little book, and if we go down to the stretch goals, they kind of highlight it here. You're going to have this book that you're going to be reading. And the way this book works is that after each round, after all the players have taken their actions, and then the enemies have done whatever they're going to do, you're going to pick up the book and you're going to read a chapter, and it's going to say, here's what's kind of happening on this mission, here's the things that are occurring. So now you have an update. Maybe it might tell you to spawn something in this corner. Maybe something fell, or maybe you heard something over here. So now you have an anomaly you have to go uncover. So then the next turn goes, you do your same thing. You guys take your actions. The actions are also pretty interesting because in this game, each player has a set amount of actions they can do, but these actions can be, taken in between each other. Something similar I do in Oathsworn. So for example, let's say I want to move and loot an item, but I still have another action. Well, you know what, Jimmy, why don't you take your action do a few things, and then Sarah, why don't you take your actions? That way I know what's going on, and then I'll take my final action. So I think that's kind of interesting that you can kind of intertwine your action spaces in general. I do that in Oathsworn, where you have your animus to take your actions, and you can be like, well, I'm going to move up here, but before I do any attacks, why don't you do your thing? Let's see what happens, and then I'll do my action. I think it adds a lot more strategic elements to the game, but then we're going to have that thematic element with what we're talking about right here. So again, you'll take your second turn, the enemy will move, and then we're going to draw to another chapter page. You'll flip to another page. It's going to keep expanding on the story. I will give this to Awaken Realms top notch. They have had very good writing, very good immersion into their world. When I was doing Tainted Grails, their Fall of the King, I think that's the name of the game, I was very, very impressed with the way the stories were integrated into the game and how they were the best part of that game. So I'm very excited to see what this game has to offer in terms of those stories as well. So, and then we talked about the interesting action and for the strategic gameplay. And we talked about this being my replacement. So I think we've covered everything that I wanted to truly cover for this title. So let's go on down into the shipping down here, and we'll talk about the overall costs as well as any VAT shipments you guys have to be aware of. So for EU, if you have just the core pledge, $17, US $27. That's fairly steep for US backers. If you're getting the adventure pledge or the explorers pledge, you can see a slight increase based on that weight cost. But you're going to see it's pretty expensive here. While the EU is probably getting subsidized in some manner, but there is going to be a VAT charge if you are EU based. So for backers from the EU, UK, and USA, and Canada, VAT or sales tax will be charged in the checkouts in compliance. What that means for US backers, based on the nexus, if Awaken Realms has reached nexus within your state, you might be charged tax. That'll be all calculated. And for those who are in the EU or UK and you have a VAT tax, you will be charged that during the pledge manager. So be aware of that. It could be from like 18 to 22%, depending on your country's VAT charges. Now they do have a split wave shipping. This would be if you want to get everything single wave, everything one time in January 25, or if you want to get things kind of split, you can do April 2024 and then you get the rest in 2025. What does that mean? Well, there's going to be, usually with the way they do is they're going to have a core box plus a stretch goals box. And the stretch goals box and maybe some of those items that are a part of the second wave are going to be held up because of development time and making the things perfect in terms of testing. So they'll have the base game done and ready to go by April 2024. If you want to pay for that game now and just I want the core game, I don't care about the stretch goals, you could do split wave shipping. It's going to cost you a little bit more. If you're looking at USA, $45 comparatively to that $27. So you're going to be paying almost double, obviously, for your shipping. It's a little bit discounted for you, but you're going to be able to get the game now. I personally don't do split wave shipping. I don't like doing split wave shipping. I want to get all of my game at one time because I want to enjoy all of my content. I want my stretch goals. I want everything that's part of it because I know how I am where I'll get the game, I'll play it, that'll be the game of the month. And then we put it away for a while because we have another game that's the game of the month. So it's going to be hard for me to, when we get the stretch goal box, be like, okay, let's break that game out again. I don't know. That's me. That's me personally. That could be totally not to you. Now, the hard thing is, as a content creator, this is BTS, behind the scenes stuff. It really is hard to not do split wave because you got to be in front of everything to get the clicks. I hate that aspect of my job here, but that's what it is. I'm still going to do single wave because that's what I do. So we're going to wrap up this video and give you my final thoughts. I am very, very excited for this one. I'm really excited for what Stalker is presenting. One, I think the gameplay looks good. I think the tactical elements are there. And I think this could potentially, I've already mentioned this, I think this potentially could be my replacement for Nemesis in terms of that thematic, spooky, scary feeling. Because everything I've heard from people who've played this game, there is that element of stress that is the similar feeling to when you're playing Nemesis. So that's kind of what I'm hoping for. And I haven't really heard anyone talk about this in terms of the space of what the overall feeling of the game is. So if you guys please like this video. If this helped you make a decision on whether or not to back this game, let me know in the comment section down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. My name is Brian from Game Brigade. I will talk to you very soon. Bye-bye.